Hey everyone, Thomas from masteringexplained.com here. Today we're going to look at some free plugins that you can use for mastering. And these are standard VST plugins that you can use in pretty much any DAW, and you will find all the links in the description where you can download them. And I will also give you some short tips on how to use these plugins. So let's go. Okay, so this is the SlickEQ from TDR. It's a very simple but good sounding 3-band equalizer. And 3 bands might seem like not a lot, but it's very useful for shaping the overall tonal balance. So we have a low band, which can be set either as a shelving or as a peak filter. And we have a mid band that is a peak filter. And we have a high band that can be set as a shelving or as a peak filter. I usually leave the high and low as shelving filters and use these in combination with the mid to set the overall tonal balance. It also has this feature that if we enable the EQ set button, then it will add some saturation to each band if we use the bands to boost. So if we, for example, have something going on in the sub-frequencies and we want that to be more audible and clear, then we can use the saturation and add a bit of sub-frequencies, and it will also add a bit of harmonic content to that in the higher frequencies. And I use that sometimes when mastering in order to get more clarity in the low end. We can also add some saturation to the whole signal as well using this output stage. If we put it at linear, then it will add no saturation, but then we also have some options to add different flavors of saturation. I like the one called Deep. I think it sounds good. It's quite subtle, but sometimes it's very useful to add some excitement to a material. Next up is a compressor from Klanghelm, and the name of it is a bit of a tongue twister, but it's called DC1A3. And it's a compressor with a nice character. It can sound quite punchy. It has a bit of color, and it's quite easy to set up and to hear if it works or not for the material that you are working on. What I will do is that I enable the deep button and I enable dual mono, and then I place a material and I set the input level so that I get up to about 0.5 dB of gain reduction. You can watch the meter and see how much it does. And then I set the output to match the level of the input. So if the input is at -11, I will set the output to +11. This way I will get unity gain through the compressor, so I can easily hear if this sounds good or not. So when I enable it, it will be the same level, and I can hear the characteristics of the compression. And if it sounds too aggressive, then we can press the relaxed button and it will sound a bit more transparent. And then we might need to adjust the input level again to match the new setting. And that's pretty much the method I use for any compressor. I try to have unity gain through the compressor and have it compress about 0.5 dB and just try to listen to the character of the compressor in that configuration. Next up is another compressor, and it's from TDR, and it's called Kotelnikov. And this one is a bit more clean than the Klanghelm compressor we just looked at, but sometimes you want a more clean compression, and I use the same method for this. I will lower the threshold until we get some gain reduction, and I will aim for something like 0.5 dB. And actually the default settings when you open a new instance of this is a quite good starting point for mastering. And we can, of course, exaggerate the compression as well in order to hear the characteristics more clearly. But in the end, we usually end up somewhere around 0.5 dB or so in gain reduction. But this is a really nice and clean sounding compressor, so check it out. Next up is another compressor, and it's also a tongue twister from Klanghelm. It's called the MJUC Jr or MJUC Jr or however it's pronounced. And this is a sort of emulation of a tube compressor. It has a lot of character. I actually like this one just for the character it adds. I don't use it as much for compression, so I will actually not touch the controls on this. I will just enable it and hear if it sounds good or not on the material I'm working with. The compression itself can be quite heavy if we use it on a full mix, so I guess it's more suitable for individual instruments or buses within the mix. So in a mastering context, I would usually use this as a character plugin, just by enabling it and listen if it works or not. Next up is Nova from TDR, and this is a favorite of mine. I use it all the time, both this version and the paid version that is also available and highly recommended. And we have made a video all about TDR Nova, and I recommend that you look at that video as well, where we share some tips on how to use this. So I won't go any deeper into this plugin, but it can be used for equalization, for dynamic processing, for dynamic EQ, and for de-essing, and for taking care of resonances, taking care of the low end. It's very versatile, and I really think you should have this plugin. Okay, now we have a limiter plugin, because we need a limiter as well in our mastering chain. And this is called LoudMax, and it's made by Thomas Munt. And it's a simple peak limiter plugin. It's not the plugin that you will go for if you need maximum loudness. It's not really good at that, but it's very good at transparent peak limiting if the material is a bit more of the sensitive kind. So it's a clean sounding, transparent limiter plugin. And it's very easy to set up as well. What I would do is I would press the link button that will link the input and output, and then play the material and adjust these until I can hear the limiting artifacts. It's quite noticeable on this kind of material that it's not really suited for this kind of material, but for softer material and when there are more sporadic peaks that needs to be taken care of, this is really good. And after we have hit this sweet spot, or if we have reached the level that we want to achieve, then we can press the link button again to unlink the input and output, and then set the output to where we want the ceiling to be, usually around -0.5 or -1 dB. And sometimes it will just sound great. It will be perfect for the material we're working with. If we want to chase loudness and make a loud master, then it might not be the right plugin for that. But for that purpose, we will have a look at another plugin. So this is limiter number 6 from Vlad Sound. It's been around for a while, but it's one of the best free options for peak limiting, I would say. It has a lot of parameters to set, but it's actually quite easy to set up if you know how to do it. So let's have a look at that. First, I would disable the compressor section by turning that one off. Then I would enable the protection, which is the last section. And then I would set the ceiling to the headroom I want, usually -0.5 or so. And then I would look at the peak limiter section, and I would set the mode to unlinked, and then set the type to A, make sure that mode is at brick wall, and then just use the gain to set the loudness that I want. So now we can just add level using this. And if we want to make a fair comparison between the input and the output, then we can also use this output level to compensate. So if we have, for example, 6 dBs of gain here, then we can reduce 6 dBs here. These are not linked, so you have to do this by hand, but then it's quite easy to listen before and after and hear what kind of damage we are doing to the material. And afterwards, we just restore this to 0. So that's the quick way to set this up and get some sound out of it. Then there are, of course, lots of other parameters to tweak as well, but these are the basics just to get going. Okay, so these were 7 free plugins that you can use for mastering. I hope you enjoyed this video and got something out of it. And if you have any more suggestions about free plugins that we can use for mastering, please share them in the comment section below. That would be really great. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and want to see more of this kind of material. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.